This is The Crossover.
Now, very pleased to be joined by Jim Jackson. Jim, welcome. Thank you for making some time.
No, thanks, bro. Sorry, running a little behind one of those hectic days, bro, where everything kind of just seems like it's coming together.
I know how it goes. I will try to get you out of here when you got to go pick up your little one. Although, as we're recording this, they're going to start announcing the final 25 of the top 75. So At any given moment before you go, I might just break in and say, if there's a name that's worth discussing, if we see any surprises.
You know something I don't know? Is my name in the top 75? Is that what you're trying to say?
Listen, man, you never know. Clyde Drexler was on.
I do know that. Ain't gonna happen. I know that much.
Well, let me ask you this, because I was going to ask you this anyway, because I think it's an interesting question. All right, the 75 on some level predictable, right? And so far we've seen from the first 50, a lot of guys from the original 50th anniversary team made it. So then it's just a matter of like tacking on the other 25. That's not the process. You could pick anybody you wanted, but we're seeing a lot of predictability so far. So I did think of this question that I wanted to pose to you.
Right.
The all-time greats, we know who they are.
Yeah.
And maybe it's more than 75. It obviously is more than 75. Is there an unconventional candidate, though, especially one maybe from your era, the time that you were in the league, your 14 years? Is there somebody we like perpetually overlook? And I'm not saying this is somebody who'd be top 75 or even top 100, but just somebody who you consider like an all-time great talent who had a major impact on the game, but that we just don't talk about enough or has not gotten the recognition they were due, aside from yourself, of course.
During my time.
Yeah, especially during your time. It doesn't have to be. Maybe even somebody you grew up on.
Shoot. Well, I mean, they finally got Dominique Wilkins in there, right? Was he in there?
Yeah. No, I don't think we've seen his name yet.
Well, that's the one.
That's the one, yeah.
I mean, you're talking about having an impact on the game, and that's right. He didn't get in on the first 25 or the other day. The impact he had in the game in the 80s to make that Atlanta team very relevant. But it was kind of like a changing of the guard because you had Michael, you had Magic and Bird going out. But the classic game with Dominique and Bird going at it in the guard. I mean, and Michael Jordan and Dominique with the highlight. I mean, he brought so much excitement to the game, kind of helped grow, even though, he didn't win the championships. But from a scoring perspective, the impact he had on the game is no way Dominique Wilkins, to me, shouldn't be in the multiple All-Star games that he was in, shouldn't be included in that. No way.
By the time this podcast comes out, the whole list will be out. So I'll just say I voted for Dominique. I was one of the voters. I did vote for him. I do think he got snubbed back in '96 when they were doing the 50th anniversary team. So,
but you had to vote. Is there somebody that you just knew besides Neek that would, during that time, that would get in that didn't?
No, there was
interesting, and I say that because it's interesting from a voter's perspective.
Yeah. No, the difficulty, Jim, was that we had. I looked at those 50, and they're not automatic, right? You could kick out anybody you wanted to add more guys from the modern era if you wanted to. The more I went down that road and talked to people who are older than I am and more versed in NBA history, the harder it got to just boot, say, Dolph Shays or anybody from
Bob Cousy
or Bob Cousy. There's a lot of guys from back then who kind of got in on the benefit of being part of a Celtics dynasty or by dominating an era when there weren't that many big men, or an era, by the way, when, especially in the early days of the league, there weren't that many black players. And then there were quotas or unofficially, right? It's really hard to take those early eras and say that they hold the same weight as today, especially when you consider the talent of athletes today or just the explosiveness. So I had a really difficult time with that. I wanted to boot more players from the original 50, and then every time I went down a path with one or the other,
right,
there was a reason to keep them. It was hard. It's really hard. I'm writing all about this. It'll be posted on SI.com by the time this podcast comes out. But no, I booted one of the original 50, Lenny Wilkins, to make room for Dominique Wilkins. Not intentional with the name, it just happened that way. But Lenny was the one who had, I think, the weakest case to stay.
Right.
No disrespect to Lenny, who's obviously an all-time great player and coach. But
well, you know how I couple that, and it is hard because one, you weren't around to see those guys play, to really have an impact,
Also,
to really feel that. This is what I always say about this when they talk about the greatest player to ever play, with Michael Jordan, right? Or is it LeBron James? I said, here's the difference. 20 years from now, it's going to skew towards, in my opinion, LeBron James. You say, well, why? I said, because the individuals writing the narrative were in the same era and saw the impact that LeBron James had. So they're going to be ones writing and voting and picking everything, and they may have missed Michael Jordan and his impact and can only hear. So the same conversation you're having right now about the top 75 and 50 and not, the old era, not to say that Michael Jordan would ever not be considered, but the narrative is different. Because if you talk to some young people who are now, watching the game, yeah, Michael was great, but they never saw him really play. They saw Steph and, LeBron and all these guys play, and that's who they see, Kobe.
Yeah.
So Mike is great. I can go buy his shoes, but I think LeBron is the great. I think Kobe, you know what I mean? Yeah. And that's who's going to be writing the narrative.
The only difference being this. You and I didn't grow up being able to watch YouTube videos of George Mikan, right?
Yeah, but not the same impact as living that impactful. You lived
sure.
LeBron and Kobe's era. You lived and how it felt when they played.
Yeah.
We lived how it felt when Michael and the Bulls came. But back in the day, when the Celtics came to town, or Magic and Showtime, or back when Bill Russell was playing, or Will Chamberlain, that was a big event.
Yeah.
For the people living in that time, and they felt that. So each era has their moment.
No question. I mean, that's the thing. Like, so much of this is not even just about. A lot of it's about the way the game changes, but a lot and there's a lot of other things that go into it. But I think more persuasive than anything about what separates people's opinions is simply generation. It's all generational. The guys who came up on Kareem are going to say Kareem's the GOAT. And you and I grew up in an era of Jordan. We're going to probably still lean that way. And you're right. The people who are still watching LeBron now or grew up on LeBron will pick him. I'm going to put that to the side. We're about to hit the moment where the NBA is going to start revealing these. If any interesting names pop on my Twitter feed while we're talking, I'll deviate. But let's just do this. We're 2 nights into the season. Mm-hmm. And so we're like in full overreaction theater mode where we're trying to draw meaning from everything. You were in the NBA for 14 years. You go into a season, you probably have a decent feel some years, maybe other years less so, about what your team actually is. So I don't think that it's completely ridiculous to react to the first couple of games, because sometimes you do see whether a team's offseason moves are panning out or not. It takes time, of course. But is there anything in the first couple nights you've seen that actually do give you an indication of where you think one team in the NBA or a couple of teams are going? Is there anything that's actually been interesting enough to say, I want to keep an eye on this because I think there's actual meaning to this?
Yeah, a couple of things. Golden State will be better than what people think. And again, not that they were outside of the top 10, going in, but I just think the way Steve Kerr and the team plays, Jordan Poole, hopefully the way he played in that first game and played in preseason wasn't just a flash in the pan, because the young man can play. The way they play together, move the basketball, if that's getting back to the Golden State, and they're going to be a tough team, a tough out. The Lakers, a work in progress, because they really didn't play a lot in preseason. The first month is kind of like their preseason, the games that they're going to play. Frank Vogel is going to experience with different lineups. They want to get to the second half of the season and be healthy, and then they'll figure out what their rotations are, and then go into the playoffs from that standpoint. On the other side, too, I looked at that Boston-New York game last night. Okay, New York won. It's only one game, but it's a big game because the expectations of the Knicks being a lot better and being more competitive Eastern Conference, and the way they won the game. With Fournier playing the way he did. That acquisition now, does it happen the rest of the year where he scores 35, 36? I don't know. But having that component that they didn't have, that outside shooter, means something. RJ Barrett struggled, but yet still he made some plays when he needed to make some plays. And then on the Celtics side, now Jaylen Brown rolling, Tatum not playing well. He's had games like that before. Can the two coexist in that manner and complement each other. So it may not be big things, but it may be little things that you look for. You kind of mark out and say, okay, let's keep our eye on this as the season progresses. Memphis, Ja Morant played extremely well. Is this a team that now starts to turn the corner? Denver went into Phoenix, okay, without Jamal Murray. Is it a big thing? One game? Yeah, but how they won it when they were down was able to come back. So it's just, it is one game, trust me, but there's some little thing I think is very important for certain teams more so than other teams.
Let me drill down on the Lakers for a second because we're always all fascinated with the Lakers. Or actually,
you know what I forgot too?
Yeah.
And Milwaukee is going to be, Milwaukee, I think, is taking a approach of lack of respect. We won it last year, but yet and still the pundits are saying that we're not going to get back, or, Brooklyn is the better team, the Lakers, you know what I'm saying? And I think that was for them opening night, ring ceremony night, to play the way they play as a team. They looked great. So that was a huge indication to me on their mental focus coming into this season.
No question. And look, if I were them, I think I'd probably be offended too. Well, all of us are obsessing over the Nets and Lakers because that's what we do. It's the NBA. It's about, who's got the most stars often. Yeah. So on the Lakers side of it, a lot of things that have been raised over the course of the offseason and the preseason. If I were to ask you to rank these concerns with the Lakers, where do these fall for you? Rank the following three: Westbrook's fit, their defense overall as a team, or the age issue. Which of those, if you were ranking those as concerns for them, how does it pan out?
Westbrook's fit
is the top concern.
Oh, top concern. And not from a big thing for me, because I think West will try to figure it out, but it's on Frank Vogel on how to utilize West, because his usage rate is always high. I think 33% over his career, even last year. But that usage rate is going to go down. And the difference being, Howard, this, is that when LeBron played with Kyrie, when he played with Chris Bosh, when he played with Kevin Love, those guys can play off the ball because they can catch and shoot. Russ, you don't have that option. So that's why I said it's going to take a minute for Vogel and the team to figure out how they gel and work together. Because they really didn't do that during the preseason. Being an older team, you're not going to spend a lot of minutes trying to figure that out before it really counts. So you're going to see some flashes of when it looks good and when it doesn't. But can they still win games doing that? That's the question. The defense side, I think they'll figure it out. I think Wayne Ellington coming to the fold, being a spot-up shooter, helps them in a lot of instances. The age thing for me is this. They're healthy going into the playoffs is what they want to see. That experience for them going into the playoffs is what they're banking on. Okay, during the regular season, Vogel's when I would imagine figuring out ways to give guys rest, okay, and allow them to work through some of the, again, when you're older, bro, the recovery time is a lot different. You know what I mean? So he's going to manage those minutes throughout the course of the year to give himself to be healthy again.
Yeah. You're on the Clipper broadcasts, so you're going to see more than your share of them. And, look, they finished in a weird way. I know, obviously, there's always the disappointment of not going deep in the playoffs, Kawhi going down. But in a weird way, I thought it was an encouraging finish in that Paul George really showed he could carry them as a solo star, which we haven't always seen in Paul George's career. How far can Paul George take this team if we assume that Kawhi does not return from the ACL this season?
Well, the biggest question is that we saw a small snippet of Paul George carrying the Clippers. Not that we haven't seen it before, because he did it with Indiana, okay? Absolutely. But this iteration of Paul George, this situation, a little bit more pressure in the Clippers, we got a snippet of who he could be. The question is, can he do that for the long term? And I'm not just talking about putting points on the board. Forget that, because he's too talented not to be able to do it. It's the leadership aspect of him when things are great and when things are not. Where's that leadership component that I think he's capable of doing over the course of 82 games? That's the next iteration for Paul George, because to me, it's not a question of his talent. Now it's all about the leadership perspective, because Kawhi is not there. You have some different components of this team that have been added, but have also come back. So that's what I'm looking at for Paul George. I look for him to take that next step from a leadership perspective.
Okay, so that's obviously step one. But then without Kawhi, you've got to have other guys who actually score, make plays. Anybody in that Clipper roster that you were looking to say, okay, if Paul George is going to have a wingman, not at the same caliber, but somebody who can actually take some pressure off, who leaps out to you immediately?
I don't think it's one. I think it's going to be a combination of, Reggie Jackson playing well, Eric Bledsoe playing well, Terrence Mann taking that next leap. I think what's huge is if Serge Ibaka comes back healthy, because for me, at the beginning of the year last year when Serge played, you had 5 guys with Nicholas Batum that could spread the court, which made it extremely difficult for you to guard. I mean, it opened up driving lanes for Kawhi, for Paul George to get downhill, okay? So Serge coming back not only gives you the pick and pop game, perimeter shooting, but he does give you a viable defender inside with Zubac, okay? That, to me, they lost that when they lost Serge, because now your offense changes a lot, because when you're in the pick and roll with Zubac, it's a lot different guarding that than it is with Serge, okay? You don't have as many options off that pick and roll. So having a healthy Serge Ibaka back in the lineup that's knocking down jump shots adds value and has more options or optionality for the offense for the Clippers.
No question. I'm morally obligated, contractually obligated. It's the law of the land. We cannot have any podcasts, radio shows, or other discussions of the NBA without at least touching on Ben Simmons. This afternoon, before you and I started this conversation, Daryl Morey was on the radio in Philly basically saying, buckle up, we're in this for the long haul. If it takes years, it takes years. I'm not trading Ben Simmons unless I get essentially, I don't know if he said equal value, but he needs an impact player. He's not taking back role players. Mm-hmm. I don't know where this thing is going next, Jim. I mean, but let me ask you it this way, because you were in the league for 14 years. I don't think I've seen a situation like this in the 24 years that I've been covering the league. But if you were a Philadelphia 76ers teammate and Ben Simmons first issues the trade demand, then doesn't show up to camp, finally comes in, then goes through the motions on a drill, gets suspended for being just checked out. What are you thinking if you're one of his teammates right now?
Oh, this is a more complicated answer than just that, because, again, I'm going to preface it. I've been there, done that, held out. I have the dubious distinction of having the longest holdout ever in the NBA, my rookie year, okay?
Back when you could actually do contract holdouts in the NBA. That was
right. That's when the Mavericks didn't want to pay me my slot being the 4th pick, okay? Understand this. First of all, I'm going to address this. Daryl Morey, what he's doing is posturing, okay? He's not only talking to the fans in regards to what he's doing, but he's talking to Rich Paul and also Ben Simmons, saying that whatever tactics you're trying to use, I'm not going for it, okay? So I'm playing tactic. It's a tactical game. Ben Simmons, Rich Paul is going to put some things in the press, and so is management. So that's what we're seeing, the jockeying for position, and also to see which way the public opinion is going to sway. Second, if you're a teammate, the toughest part about this, during my holdout, the guys understood I was a rookie. I had to get what I had to get. I haven't developed a relationship with them yet. So it wasn't like those guys held that against me. Difference with Ben Simmons is they played with him. They've been in the locker room. It's a camaraderie issue here going on, a trust issue going on here. Because when teammates tried to reach out, according to reports, he didn't reach back. It's also been a contentious nature between Joel and Ben from day one, and other players that got caught in the mix. So it's not a really good situation for the organization, for the players, because if Ben does come back, I don't see how you kind of refuse, even though the locker rooms can be mended, I don't know how you really do that from a pure, genuine perspective, where I can trust you and you can trust me, okay? That's the issue I see here. And I think right now, Ben Simmons, Rich Paul, they're putting in this position where they're saying, listen, okay, if I don't play, I won't get paid. But we're going to figure out a way that I'm in, that I force my hand to force management to have to trade me a lot sooner than what they want. Now, keep in mind this, Howard. Philly has more leverage if they win early, because then they don't feel the pressure to have to trade it. If they're losing early, Embiid's kind of like, what we're doing, we need some more players. Now it's on them. The last part, I would say this. the outside looking in, oh, what I would do, he's stupid, he needs to do this, why is he doing this, organizations. What I've always tried to caution people about is this. What you're hearing in social media, whether that's on TV, third person, on the radio, you don't have the intricate details of the conversations that are going on. So you're basing what you would do on what you're hearing. When I was holding out, there was a lot of stuff people were saying that I was listening to in the media that didn't have a clue what was going on inside and why I was basing my decision on what I wanted to do because of the information I was able to obtain, not on what, it was out there in the public view. So the public view is operating off of this when it's 30,000 more feet up here of conversations that both sides have had as to why they're entrenched in their own way with these negotiations.
Yeah. And more complicated now based on the fact that, of course, we have social media, so we're getting everything almost in real time. But obviously, as you point out, never the full picture. I think you got to jump to go pick your kid up. So
you got one more?
Yeah.
One more. I need 2 more. I got 2 minutes.
All right, 2 minutes. How about this? 2 minutes on Kyrie, because I have a similar thought on Kyrie, which is this. Slightly different. You could have 39 games of Kyrie, or you could have 0. The Nets have opted for 0 on the presumed premise that it's too hard to have him coming and going, to have him as a part-time player, to integrate him and then have to play without him and keep reformatting the rotation.
Yep.
And on a basketball level, that intuitively makes sense to me, Jim, but I have not been in that locker room or anywhere that you have. So you tell me, as a pure basketball matter, all the other stuff aside, the vaccine aside, is that the right decision? Are you better off as a team with your third best player going with 0 games as opposed to 39 and having to constantly deal with the changing from day to day?
From an organization perspective, I agree with what Brooklyn did because they had to do what they had to do. Okay. That doesn't mean I disagree with Kyrie and his stance, but organizationally, they had to look at it and say, how does this really affect our team short term and long term? Okay. Because if we're in a playoff hunt, and he can't play 3 games at home against a top tier. Say you get to the Eastern Conference Finals against Milwaukee, and you can't play, the 2 games you're going to have at home, and maybe the third in Game 6 if you're the second seed or whatever it may be. This is say total of 3 games. How does that affect you? Now the fluctuation on how you play can really affect how you play mentally. So I'm not mad at that. Kyrie's perspective, I tell people all the time, different than Ben Simmons. Ben's is a personal problem with an individual player, organization, city. Kyrie's is a personal problem. Players are more accepting of that and said, okay, let's say Kyrie a month from now chooses to take the shot. He will be welcome, from what I understand and what I would do, welcome back in with open arms because this was a personal decision, whether I agree with it or not. I can't say it's selfish on what this man chooses to put in his body or not, or how he chooses. Do I agree at times? Well, maybe not. But I can't hold that personal decision against you in this aspect. When the team came together, COVID wasn't a factor. It is a factor now. For him and what he researches, it doesn't fit his mold right now. Cool, Kai. But we got to move on as a team. Kai, you got to understand that. You do you, but we have to do us as a team and as an organization. That's my perspective on it. I know Kyrie has had some stuff in the past and people are killing him and say, okay, end of the day, it's his decision on what he wants to do with his body. Whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, it doesn't matter. Now, I would say this, and before we go, if you don't want to be vaccinated, fine. But you can't be out here living reckless either. That means that you have to do all the things that you have to do to ensure that you protect yourself and you protect people around you if you choose not to get vaccinated. When you're out there acting reckless, that's the issue. That's when I have a problem.
Would you agree, too, though? Is it hard to have a guy coming and going if they wanted to go the other route, if they decide to keep him?
Well, think about if you're the best acquisition of the year may be Patty Mills, quietly, because now he's able to really define a role. Imagine if Patty Mills is playing great at home. Okay, now he gets on the road. Again, now he's a role player. He's been a role player his whole career. But now the fluctuation goes from I'm playing 35, 36 minutes at home, but now I'm on the road and my impact is not the same. The team plays different in those minutes with Patty Mills than they do with Kyrie. It's a difference if Kyrie started the season, played games, got hurt, Patty came in and filled, and you knew Kyrie was coming back. That's not the case because it's a fluctuation of, home game stand here or road trip. Yeah. It's a tough decision.
Yeah. No, that's why I thought as a basketball matter, I totally get it. It makes sense from a consistency and cohesion standpoint. Yeah. Jim, this has been great. Always great chatting with you. Good to see you. I know you got to go pick up your son. We'll have to do this again sometime soon, my friend.
Let's do it down the line, brother. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. No, thank you.